I walk a straight line, shackled and chained. Oh, gruesome Gertie is calling my name. There is no mercy in this penitentiary. Just ask the Hillstring Gang or Angola 3. I'm here for life, I'm here to die. Inside these walls, inside the wire. And when the wolf cries, I know it's over. Oh, bloody Angola. Oh, bloody Angola.
Hey everyone, welcome back to 50 Shades of Evil. I'm bringing you another episode today on Bloody Angola Podcast. I'm Jim Chapman, your host. And before I get into today's episode, if you don't mind and you're enjoying this podcast, please share it wherever you're listening on social media. This is the easiest way for me and my company to build an audience, and it sure would help. It wouldn't cost you anything, but if you're enjoying it, please do so. Rate us on Apple Podcast or wherever you listen if you're enjoying the content that I'm bringing you with this podcast. Now, let's get into today's episode. And today we're going to Indiana, and I'm going to tell you about a nurse by the name of Orville Lynn Majors. Now, Orville was convicted of killing 6 of his patients. However, as bad as that is, and it's horrible, he's suspected as killing as many as 130 of his patients. So whatever the definition of true evil is, if evil had a face, it would look like Orville Majors. And today I'm going to tell you about his crimes, his conviction, and his sentencing. So let's get into it. And this one starts out in 1961 in Linton, Indiana. That's where Orville was born to Orville Majors Sr. and Anna Majors. Now, Linton, it's a very small town at this time in history. As a matter of fact, even today, very small town. Only about 5,000 people live there. It's a small coal mining community in the southwest area of the state of Indiana. Now, the family's roots were not in the state of Indiana, but rather in Kentucky. But his mom and dad would settle in Indiana prior to Orville's birth, and as a young boy, Orville would go by his middle name, which was Lynn. Now, neighbors would later describe him as a nice young man who mostly kept to himself, but did play well with other children. So while Orville was in his teens, he kind of got a bug that bit him, and that bug was the nursing bug. How did he get it? Well, he was the primary caregiver to his grandmother. She lived in a mobile home behind the family's house, and that experience would spark a fire of sorts in Orville Majors to become a nurse. So neighbors would even notice later on, and they would say this, that Orville was very compassionate with both humans and animals. One particular neighbor would share a story where Orville actually performed mouth-to-mouth on a fish after the fish jumped out of its tank. I mean, a little strange to me, but there you have it. Now, his family, they were hardworking folks, and they were the typical family with the typical family struggles financially. His dad was a blue-collar guy. He worked in the coal mine, and somehow he made it work for Orville and his sisters and his mother. Now, in the 1980s, prior to going to nursing school, Orville opens up a pet store. And this pet store was in a nearby community, and it was called Fins and Feathers. And he sold aquariums there. He sold hamsters, fish, other small pets. I mean, this thing wasn't PetSmart by any stretch of the imagination, just a small community family-owned pet store. His mother would help him run that store, as a matter of fact. So in 1987, after running that pet store, which was pretty successful, Orville decides he's ready to start nursing school, and I guess that was his dream, was to be a nurse. Now, he was a little bit older. He was like 27 years old at this point, but he decides, hey, I'm going to give nursing school a try. And he actually goes to nursing school in Nashville, Tennessee, to the Nashville School of Practical Nursing. He graduates from there in 1989, and he returns to Indiana that same year, and he starts working as an LPN for a hospital called Vermilion County Hospital. Small hospital, and it was only like 56 beds. It was in Clinton, Indiana, which is probably about 50 miles from where he grew up. And he held that position until 1991. Then a hospital in Tennessee, they contact him and they offer him a little more money, and he goes to work in Tennessee for that higher pay. But I guess he didn't like it, whatever. He stayed there a couple of years, and he returns at the age of 31 back to Indiana. This is in 1993. He also returns to that same exact hospital, Vermilion County Hospital. And when he returns, he quickly earns some pretty good evaluations. He becomes one of the most popular nurses in the facility. Co-workers would describe him as like a big teddy bear. He was a very likable guy, and he was always laughing, according to his co-workers. Now, big key to note here, Vermilion County Hospital, prior to Orville Majors returning to work there in 1993, they averaged about 4 deaths annually. Now, keep that in mind. As I said, the hospital's small, just 58 total beds, and only 4 of those beds were ICU beds, which the ICU is where Orville worked. And these were primarily elderly people in the ICU. And while he got off to a fast start in March of 1993, when he made his way back to Vermilion County Hospital, it would not be long after before his coworkers would notice a change in him, a very negative change. Orville Majors would start making off-putting comments to other staff members about his patients. Things like saying his older patients should, quote, be gassed, unquote. He would call the families of those older patients white trash, and his demeanor just would completely change, according to colleagues. Now, one of his friends at the hospital would notice that whenever Majors would go to work, off work, whatever, he would carry a bag full of syringes. And it would be discovered later that Majors had developed a very serious meth addiction, which that would explain how irritable he would get with his patients. Irritability, one of the key signs of meth withdrawal, and colleagues would notice his remarks getting worse over several months in 1993. So he turns 32 in the summer of that year, and slowly, over the remaining months of 1993, the number of patients dying at that hospital would rise. And this brings me into January of 1994. And I'm going to tell you about 89-year-old Luella Hopkins. Now, she was admitted to Vermilion County Hospital that January for complications from pneumonia, which you're 89 years old, big risk when you get pneumonia. However, Luella, she seems to be recovering quickly. She gains weight, she gets stronger, and by January 8th of 1994, she was due to be released. Now, the day of that release, around 2:30 p.m., Majors goes into her room, and he's carrying a syringe. And he tells Luella he's going to give her a shot, but he doesn't tell her why. He gives her the shot, and he leaves. Majors then goes to the nurse's station, and he reports there was a problem in Luella's room. Other nurses rush into that room, and they find the 89-year-old gasping for air. Now, sadly, she suddenly has a heart attack and dies due to her inability to get oxygen. So her doctor was completely perplexed about this. She had appeared well enough to go home, yet she has a heart attack just prior to her release. And at this point, no one had any idea that Orville Majors had given her a shot, and due to her age of 89 years old, there was really no investigation. Everyone just assumed the heart attack was due to her age. So in the months that followed, patients dying at Vermilion Hospital would climb at an absolutely alarming rate. So quick, in fact, that even many nurses at the hospital would question their own manners of care. They would think to themselves, is there something they may be doing to cause this? Now, one commonality with these deaths that would become more apparent as time went on was the manner in which these people would die. They were all older, and they would all die by having first respiratory failure, followed by a heart attack. And it was a pattern in every death. Now, with everything I just told you, you would think the hospital would have picked up on that. But the simple truth is they didn't. And as the winter would move into spring, things would get worse. Now, although the hospital itself could not figure out what was going on, other nurses would start noticing some eerie consequences. One thing they noticed was that every time there was a death of a patient, Orville Majors was one of the nurses on duty. Now, while they would whisper about this fact, no one really believed Majors was killing people. And that brings me to April 2nd of 1994. And I'm going to tell you about 74-year-old Cecil Smith, who, like Luella Hawkins, was admitted for pneumonia-related symptoms. Now, he's placed in ICU, and he's cared for, and a day after being admitted, Cecil speaks to his son on the phone. And his son asked him, Dad, how are you feeling? And Cecil said he felt like he was burning on the inside. Shortly thereafter, Cecil's blood pressure spikes, and he dies.
Jim, did you see what happened in Texas today?
Wait, before you tell me that, let me tell you what happened in New York.
It cannot be as crazy as the case I told you about yesterday in Louisiana.
You know what? We should do a podcast about it.
And with that, we did. Crime Wire Weekly covers the crime news headlines that have dominated the week.
We cover trending crimes from all over the country and even sprinkle in a few globally.
Crime Wire Weekly is available now wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Simply by searching Crime Wire Weekly or clicking the link in the description of this podcast. Yet again, no investigation. Death just attributed to complications from pneumonia. And that brings me to 82-year-old Dorothea Hickson, who was admitted to the hospital for fluid buildup in her lungs. Now, in Dorothea's case, this was something she had suffered from in the past. She had a history of it. So she's treated in the ICU. And her doctor, he's feeling good about her treatment. She was stable, and he considered her kind of on the other side of this illness. So on April 23rd of 1994, just minutes into his shift, Orville Majors, he walks into her room. And at this point, she's actually surrounded by several family members. And Majors injects Dorothea's IV. Now, almost immediately, she flatlines. Now, of course, his family is thinking WTF, but they trusted Orville. I mean, this is their nurse, and they felt like they knew this guy because he had been taking care of Dorothea for a good little while here in the hospital. So they saw him inject this stuff, but they didn't put two and two together. They just thought this was a big coincidence. Now, elsewhere in the hospital, not so much. Other nurses working the shift, they just couldn't make sense of it. Yet again, even with all these whispers from coworkers, no investigation. In that same week, Majors celebrates his 33rd birthday. Now, at the end of 1994, death assessments come out, and they were absolutely unbelievable. In 1993, when they had a spike in deaths after Majors' employment, they had a total of 33, a good bit away from 4, right? Well, as bad as that was, the number that they got in 1994 would absolutely blow everyone's mind. Get ready for this. 1994's death assessment, 101 deaths. And that brings me to nursing supervisor Dawn Steerick. Now, she really dove into this. She was a supervisor, and it was kind of on her to figure out what the fuck is going on in this hospital and why is the fatality rate so high. So in March of 1995, she starts really digging into this. And initially her thoughts are, well, maybe it's a nurse on one shift miscommunicating with a nurse on another shift and telling them inaccurate information, not intentionally, but just, I don't know, making a mistake. And so she starts pulling time cards and comparing who's working when and that sort of thing. And what she discovers is shocking. Listen to this stat. Of the 147 patients total that died between March of 1993, when Orville Majors started working there, in March of 1995, when this lady starts investigating it, Majors had been working during 130 of these deaths. So she knew, which you're probably already realizing at this point in the story, the chances of that being a coincidence, that high of a number of times when Majors was at work, are pretty much zero. So the first thing she does is she calls her higher ups and she says, Houston, we got a freaking problem. And they in turn call the lawyers and they tell them, Houston, we got a freaking problem. And then she calls the state police. So detectives, they start working this case, and Majors gets suspended pending this investigation. Detectives discover all the commonalities in all of these deaths that I've already told you about, and the fact that Majors was there for like 90% of these deaths, and detectives approach him to interview him to get his side of this story. But Majors, he lawyers up. He refuses an interview, and get this, how is this for common sense stupidity? Due to HIPAA, the hospital refuses to release hospital records despite the detectives asking for them. So it takes subpoenas. When you're investigating a case involving a hospital, you have to subpoena, a judge then signs that, and you can get those records. But this increases the time on all that stuff happening. And not only that, it increases the time of making an arrest. Eventually, the public, they learn that Orville is suspected of this. And this is a small community, right? They go into absolute shock. Majors knew most of these people. And Majors, he goes on the defensive at this point in time, and he starts doing media all over the place saying, I had nothing to do with these people dying. They were all pretty much on their deathbed, and God did his will. It had nothing to do with me. He even goes on the popular Phil Donahue show back then to plead his innocence. He claimed he was a scapegoat. Eventually, those records do get released. Now, this whole time, throughout the entire investigation, Majors, he's still working at that pet store. In the winter of 1953, in a quiet, working-class apartment across from a synagogue in Seagate, Brooklyn, a boy named Jeffrey Epstein took his first breath. He was the son of a city parks gardener and a homemaker. A freckled, piano-playing math prodigy who skipped grades, tutored classmates for pocket change, and dreamed of wealth while riding his bike along the Coney Island boardwalk. But that boy would grow into one of the most powerful, most connected, and most controversial figures of the modern age. This is not a story that ends where most people think it begins. This is the complete journey. Every chapter, every detail, every unanswered question. From the tree-lined streets of a gated Brooklyn enclave to the glittering boardrooms of Wall Street. From elite private schools to private islands. From handwritten black books filled with the world's most influential names to federal courtrooms in a Manhattan jail cell that still fuels debate today. Come with me as I walk you through Jeffrey Epstein's childhood summers on the private beach, through his accelerated high school years, through his early days at Cooper Union and NYU. I will trace the mysterious financial empire he built with almost no formal credentials. You will listen to the voices of survivors as I examine the investigations, the sweetheart deals, the enablers, the protectors, and the power structures that allowed all of it to happen. No speculation without evidence, no conspiracy without documentation. Just the facts, the records, the testimonies, and the context that history demands. Over the course of this series, I will release meticulously researched episodes that take you deeper than any headline ever could. Each one built on court documents, financial filings, classmate recollections, investigative reporting, and the first-hand accounts that have emerged over decades. This is the story of how ordinary ambition can twist into something extraordinary, and how power, once accumulated, can shield even the darkest secrets. So if you're here because you want the full picture, the boy, the man, the empire, the fall, and everything left in the ruins, you're in the right place. Welcome to Exposed Investigates Jeffrey Epstein. So police eventually they get a search warrant for Majors' residence, and they make the most horrific discovery yet. In evidence that would finally lead to his arrest, they found empty vials of two particular drugs. The first being potassium chloride and the second being epinephrine. That's all they needed. These two drugs alone would cause every symptom and every death that hospital was dealing with. And on December 29th, 1997, after a nearly 3-year and $2 million investigation, Majors is arrested. Now, Orville at this time is 36 years old. But despite that, despite all this evidence, he still maintains his innocence. Throughout the trial, still maintains his innocence. But after 79 witnesses, in the end, Orville Majors is convicted in the murder of 6 patients, and he is sentenced to 360 years in prison. Now, as I told you at the beginning of this one, he was suspected of killing at least 130 patients. But these particular cases, these 6 that he got convicted of and charged with, those had a ton of proof with them. So they were the easiest to get a conviction on. Orville Majors was then sent to serve his sentence in Indiana State Prison. And I'm quite sure that he had a very rough time in prison. Look, let me tell you something about inmates if you ain't learned it yet on Bloody Angola Podcast. They love their mothers, because 99% of the time, their mothers are the only ones in the world that will come see them in prison. And when they found out that this guy was killing elderly women, grandmothers, great-grandmothers, that sort of thing, I promise you, inmates wanted to get their hands on Orville Majors. It was going to be no easy task, especially at that prison. And let me tell you a little bit about Indiana State Prison. It's also known as Indiana State Prison, Michigan City. It's a maximum security only prison, and it is only for adult male inmates. It's also one of the state's oldest prisons, and it houses all of the male death row inmates in Indiana. It's also where all the folks put to death inside of that particular prison. And it's old. It was opened in 1860, believe it or not. It's the oldest continuously operating prison in Indiana. And I did misspeak just a second ago. I said it was just maximum security. There are some other levels mixed in there as well, but it's primarily maximum security. It has about 2,800 beds, and at any given time, you're looking at about 2,500 inmates inside of that prison. And if you're curious about some famous inmates that may have been in there, or infamous, I should say, how about John Dillinger? He was housed there. He was a bank robber, very famous bank robber. Just Google him if you hadn't heard of him. In 1933, he was housed at that particular prison. One of the most infamous gangsters of all time, bank robber-wise. So not a fun place, and I'm sure not a fun place for Orville Majors, but he wouldn't make it long there. He would actually die about 20 years after he got there at the age of 56. And in a strange bit of poetic justice, he would die of a heart attack. How about that? Now, he would forever be known by the moniker, the Angel of Death. That's what he's known as. And what a piece of shit, Orville Majors. And I firmly believe that he is responsible for probably every one of those 130 murders he's suspected of. Now, you may wonder about Vermilion County Hospital, where all these deaths took place. Well, it would be shut down shortly after all of this came out, and then it would be reopened and renamed Union Hospital. And believe it or not, it still operates today. So there you have it. What an evil son of a bitch that guy was. Thank you so much for listening. I can't tell y'all how much I appreciate it. I do commercial-free early releases. Patreon.com/Bloody Angola Podcast. Check that out. I'll be back next week with another 50 Shades of Evil episode. Not sure where I'm going yet, but I promise you it's going to be another banger. So look for that. And these 50 Shades of Evil, I've had a couple people ask me because they're a little bit shorter than what I usually do on Bloody Angola Podcast, and that's intentional. Some people like the 30-minute hitters, if you will. So these are all about 30 minutes in length. I hope you're enjoying them. Until next time, for Bloody Angola, I'm Jim Chapman. Much love.
I walk a straight line, shackled and chained. Oh, gruesome Gertie is calling my name. There is no mercy in this penitentiary. Just ask the Hill String Gang, Angola